Moses, the incomparable lawgiver of history, was about to die. He gathered about himself the people whom he had led for 40 years, and he said to them in a strong and powerful voice, which was rather remarkable considering how advanced in age he was, he gathered them around and he said to them, "Remember the days of old. Consider the years, age after age. Ask your mothers and fathers to tell you. Inquire of your elders, and they will inform you." Was about to leave them. They were ready to cross the Jordan River to go into the new land and make it their own, but he was destined to remain behind, to die and to be buried in an unmarked and in an unknown grave in the wilderness of Moab. Now, one would expect that at such a time, Moses would have wanted to talk to his people about the future, about the problems and the opportunities that lay ahead, about the challenges that confronted him. Yet instead, he gave them a lesson in history, a detailed lecture on things long ago. Remember, he said, the days of old. He reminded them of what had befallen the generation of the flood. He recalled for them the story of the Tower of Babel and the calamity that had struck Sodom and Gomorrah. His valedictory address was delivered within the context of history, and it was from the lessons of the past that Moses extracted instruction for the present and for the future, and by deliberately employing that kind of a teaching method, Moses was trying to impress upon his people that without a past, there can be no future. Without a history, there can be no destiny. In effect, Moses was saying to his people what we have painfully learned in our century, that those who pay no heed to history are condemned to relive it. George Santayana, the Spanish-born American poet and philosopher who taught at Harvard, said it for us in our time. If some among us would make note of that truth, because too many among us have taken to literally the cynical remark of Henry Ford in the 1920s that history is bunk. Perhaps the past is unimportant, and oldness synonymous with decay. For them, everything that has survived from a bygone time, morality, values, idealism, is considered at best naive. For them, ancient wisdom is worthless, and classical literature is dead. In sexual behavior, for them, being in is where it's at. Note also for them the abuse of grammatical purity. But as a corrective to all of this comes the insightful opinion of a renowned historian. In an essay entitled The Lessons of History, an epilogue generation, to many of whose intellectual leaders are busy debunking history, to many of whom scoff at the past as though it were a heap of rubbish. Our generation would do well to restrain our know-it-all attitude. We would equally do well to begin to cultivate a little of the humility that was the hallmark of an Albert Einstein. Einstein possessed that kind of humility, supreme genius though he was. Einstein was not ashamed to admit in these words, his words, "My inner and outer life are based on the labors of others, living and dead, my friends. The greater we are, the greater is our reverence for yesterday. The more creative we are, the more we utilize the foundations of the past as the building blocks for the present. And then on the other hand, are the angry, the impatient, the impetuous, who are expert at wrecking, perhaps because they are incapable of building. This Day of Atonement is a particularly appropriate day to stress reverence for the past. Especially today, ought we to remember that in the lexicon of Jewish religious thought, the past is more than chronology, more even than history. It was, according to rabbinic tradition, Yom Kippur, when Moses returned from the top of Mount Sinai bearing a second set of tablets. Do you remember what happened to the first set? You might recall that when Moses came down from the mountain the first time carrying the tablets of the law, he took those tablets, threw them down, smashed them, because he saw that in his absence the people had built that idolatrous golden calf. So God then ordered Moses, after he threw and smashed down the tablets, ordered Moses to climb to the top of the mountain again and to carve a second set of tablets. Values are eternal. Then there is hope for humanity. But if the past is dead, then the future is already stillborn. But if the ideals and traditions of yesterday continue to inspire us, then we will one day reach our full potential as human beings. A famous historian put it this way: how can we be so bad and yet so good? So cruel and yet so kind? if no one has ever quenched the spark of evil inside our hearts, no one has ever destroyed the spark of good either. My friends, the world has its golden ages and its dark ages. It has had periods of enlightenment and periods of inquisition, periods of tolerance and periods of tyranny. The ambivalence is at once our paradox and our destiny. King David, the shepherd king of ancient Israel, once said that we human beings are vanity, that our days are as a shadow that passeth away, and yet it was the same David, the same poet, who elsewhere said that God has made us a little lower than the angels, crowned us with honor and with glory. Both views from the same man. Isn't there an inherent contradiction? Superficially, yes. But there is no contradiction in depth. For those 2 points of view of what we are represent our 2 potentialities. My friends, right at this very moment. We who are human can wing our way to distant planets, and simultaneously we can destroy this earth in a total inferno. We can reach the loftiest moral height, or we can sink to the lowest depths of degradation. We can be angels or fiends, scoundrels or saints. And in this glaring paradox, the composers of Jewish religious thought found an optimistic melody in the uneven symphony of history. There are time stretches of varying lengths when we seem hopelessly irretrievable, despairingly incorrigible. Recall that passage in the book of Genesis. Part of the myth of creation in early prehistory. In the myth, the biblical author has God saying, I have resolved to put an end to every human being, for they have filled the earth with violence and outrage. You see, even God, according to the author of that biblical myth, seemed to have given up on us. But then came, as it were, God's second thoughts and our second chance. The master of the universe pledged, though the inclination of man's mind is evil from his youth, never again will I destroy any living creature as I have done. And so a rainbow of hope appeared. A symbol of understanding between human being, the moral paradox, and God, the eternally forgiving. Whatever it is that we conceive the God of history to be, it seems to me that if our God is a loving God, then we have to understand that that God of history understands that in our moral calendar, yours and mine, the moral calendar of humanity, there are many blank days and some lost weekends. We may be living through what subsequently will be viewed as one of the lost weekends in history. Behold, darkness covers the earth, and black clouds shroud the nations. My friends, are we not in a time when we are consumed by hate and drenched in violence? War and hunger and bloodshed prevail on earth. Poverty, hunger abound about us. And even though East and West have taken what seems to be a half a step back from that line, we still face the possibility of total annihilation. Yet even as we stand on the brink of despair, we hear the comforting words of history as accented by the Hebrew prophet. But it shall come to pass that at evening time there shall be light. Indeed, at evening time there shall be light. This is our hope. This is our dream. This is our faith.